Hi and welcome to my blog. Today I'll be looking at evaluation question 7, which is looking back at your prelim task, what do you feel you have learnt in the progression from it to the full product? So starting off, I think I'm going to talk about my front covers. For my prelim task, we created a front cover and contents page for a school magazine, and for this task, we created front cover, double page spread, and contents page for a music magazine concept, which we chose our genre. I chose indie. For starters, I think I've learned many things in the sense of using Photoshop and using the Photoshop programs. If you look back to my first prelim task, which I'll put down here or near me, I think I didn't have as many Photoshop skills as I do now. For like the model picture, I used the magic wand to just crop it, and you can see the crop lines are still visible, and I've got a background which makes it even more visible, which I didn't think about before. Whereas now I used a white solid background and I didn't crop the models out, and I think the picture overall looks a much more clean and put together and helps everything come together. Whereas in my prelim task it was quite messy because of the cropping, and I think also the lighting and the colouring when it came to doing it in Photoshop, it was a bit shabby because I was experimenting with different light tones and colours, whereas for this one I sort of knew the direction I wanted to go and I knew what lighting was going to look realistic and not too harsh on the skin. Another thing that I think I've learnt with Photoshop is using text effectively. With the other magazine, I was very concerned about using loads of space and trying to use different colours, different fonts, and I don't think that worked because I was trying to put too many elements on one page. Whereas if you look at the task that I've done now for Indie Head, the text is not covering the whole page, it's spaced out quite neatly and it looks minimalistic. So I've learnt to take my brief and use that to help me in creating the magazine, whereas with my prelim task, I think I was more concerned with trying to make it look pretty or use up all the space and things like that. Also for the masthead, I had quite a lot of negative space in my prelim task, and as I said before, I was trying to fill out with text, and especially the top of the magazine, I was trying to get the masthead to be stretched out so it covered that space, and I don't think that worked to my advantage as it just looked quite chunky and it looks quite not professional, isn't professional at all. Whereas for this task, I think I kept it quite, as I said before, minimalistic and clean. So I just put the masthead on and lit it on the background. I didn't try and make its own background for it. And I think that works a lot more better with the genre of the magazine, but also just making it look more clean and professional. I've kind of kept this idea of having the quote at the bottom in the see-through blocks. I think this worked effectively for both of these tasks, and I think it's also, when progressing, it's also good to look at what went well in the prelim task as well, because if I just tried to change everything, I wouldn't look at all the positives and things that worked and just try to change them, and it might look even more messier. So I took that as something that worked well for this magazine and I brought it onto that magazine, and I think it worked well. Some other things I think I've learned from my front cover is modelling and posing. For my prelim, I had the model with quite a lot of props and usage of mise-en-scène. I had like books and globes and all sorts, and I think that I thought that more would make the picture more interesting and make the magazine more fun to look at. But then from this task that I've done now, I can see that more does not always work. I think less is more sometimes, and I've just got the simple model posing with really simple mise-en-scène, and it's a very minimalistic picture, but I think it works well because it's not overcrowding, it's not too in your face, but yet it intrigues the person to pick it up. Some other things that I think have progressed was the usage of a barcode. I didn't do this in my first magazine. not because I didn't think school magazines didn't have barcodes, but because I didn't think that far ahead. Whereas for this one, I was thinking about what people are going to see. I put an issue date, I put the barcode, I put the price, and I think that that's important when creating a magazine, to think about not just the appearance of it, but also the things that are conventions seen on other magazines. And I definitely looked at other indie music magazines that inspired me, but also kind of taught me what the conventions were. Not to say that I stick to those conventions all the way through, but the things that are mainly seen or like just very common and things I thought would work with my magazine, I used. And on my prelim, I didn't really do that. I looked more at what went well for me and what would be suitable for my picture, instead of working backward and looking at other magazines that could inspire me. So there's no barcode, there's no price, there's no issue date, and it didn't look like a convincing magazine overall. Also because of, I think I took a colour from the picture, which is green, that you can see slightly on the image, and I blew that up and used that text colour everywhere. And I think it worked on some of the text, but on others it didn't really work. I kind of looked at this and thought, I like this idea, but I need to adapt it to fit and to make it look a bit more professional. So then I took that concept and kind of progressed it and produced it in a different way in my music magazine. I took the blues from the denim jackets and I put them subtly in. I didn't overload it with blue. There's a good mix of blue and black, and I think it works a lot more effectively because it's not too in your face, it's not distracting from the main image like the green in the prelim task, but it also adds something to the page, a bit more character, and doesn't make it just look flat. When creating my prelim contents page, I was very concerned about making it linked to the front cover, so I decided to use the same background, but then I also, on top of that, used these paint splashes. I think it worked well, but it was a bit overwhelming, and because my text was so big, the page looked like it was missing something, but also that it was overloaded. I used same texts and I had these Polaroid pictures, and I think this page worked well for what it was for the brief of being a school magazine, but the pictures were quite similar, and as I said, there was so many features on the magazine that it was a bit overwhelming, but there was lots of big text that it looked like there needed to be a bit more text on the page. I learnt from this when making my music magazine, as I used a variety of different texts and different sizes. So I've got smaller text and then like bigger texts, and the images are quite different as well. I've got like different shots of concert pictured using different mise en scène, different fashions, whereas the school magazine had quite a lot of similar poses and settings and models, I suppose. Although this it did work because the magazine was for a school in which it was based mostly on females. I took that concept and also used it for my other magazine as it was targeting females, so I used mainly females in my pictures. Another thing that I think that I've learned is the spacing of pictures and how many pictures. I would say from a music magazine that the pictures are spaced out well, and looking at other contents pages, I think it's not exactly the same, but it uses the concept of lines and spacing and layout to make sure things aren't too pushed together, but they're also spaced apart. Like I said at the beginning, I used the graphics of like these Polaroid pictures and paint splashes. I liked using graphics in the prelim task, but I think that those kind of graphics wouldn't have been really suitable for the music task. So I brought in the element of using crosses and sort of a little colour palette which suits my magazine. In terms of Photoshop skills for the contents page, I've learned quite a lot. I've been able to edit my pictures a lot more than I was for my prelim task. For my prelim, I just edited the colours and the lighting, but for this task I've been able to manipulate the pictures, do adding in things such as a flower crown, which I added in, changing colours, making a jacket pink, from blue to pink, adding text over pictures, things like that have progressed for me. My general skills in Photoshop, although I wouldn't say they're perfect yet, I think that they've definitely been developed, or you've been able to make the text look a lot more solid because of bevel embossed, make layers look a lot more put together instead of just hovering over each other, which is kind of the effect that I had for my prelim task. Another thing that I think that I've worked on is the actual content. I was so caught up in trying to make the contents page look pretty that I forgot to think about the content and the things I was putting in the magazine. Whereas for this task, I did my research, I put in loads of content, I wrote about the content a lot more, and I looked at other conventions and things like that, and I added those in. So I think I've done a lot more research with this, I've gone into a lot more depth, and my general research skills have definitely progressed. For my prelim task, I think for the front cover and the contents page, I think they do link because of the background, but in terms of there being some sort of other linkage, I've got that green coming through and some of the same text used, but it sort of looks like a copy of the front page. And I think from my final full product that I've done now for the music magazine, I've made the 2 pages link, but I've also made them differ in some way, and I think that's important because they're not the same pages, they're not there to do the same thing. And in my prelim I didn't really think about that, I just wanted the pages to link, and I kind of produced 2 very similar pages that don't really differ that much. And yeah, I think that I've definitely progressed because I've seen that these pages aren't there to do the same thing, they're not there to produce or make copies of the same pages, they're there to do different things. Front covers, you've got the picture, you've got the text, but then contents page you've got more information coming through, and I've definitely thought about that more in depth and added that information in. For the final product, I also created a double page spread, which was in the brief, whereas in the prelim task I didn't do this, but I think I can still compare it because I've learnt so many more things, so much more from doing the double page spread. I've kind of been able to use things like opacity, and having the chance to create another page that we didn't do in the prelim task was very beneficial because I've just learnt so many more techniques, and I've been able to edit pictures further. So for example, this large picture that I used on my double page spread, I've been able to look at the brightness, look at the colours used, and I've been able to take that background and bring it through the whole page. Also with the sea in the background, being able to put that opacity down and put that above the layer below, above it, and also again with the research, I researched so much more with conventions and things that I thought I wanted to change in terms of conventions, but conventions that I also wanted to stick to. I was also able to create an interview and build these characters of the artist, which I didn't really do for my front cover, my contents page for my prelim task. I didn't think about the characters behind the pictures, whereas for my double page spread it really challenged me to think about that and think about the music industry and make these interesting characters that a reader would be enticed by. And also thinking about sort of the general layout of things. I've kept this colour scheme going all the way through, but it's subtle, it's not overwhelming through the graphics and the big C and some of the text. I've been able to make the text interesting and also making it smaller because with my prelim task I started to make my text very big just to fill up space, but here I've learned that that's not always the best thing to do. It's more better to kind of fill that up with smaller writing so the reader feels as if they're getting more content. I used a lot more fonts, I think, with my prelim task I was a bit scared to go out there and use more fonts, but for this one I wanted, use things like Dfont and Photoshop fonts and stuff like that to add a variety of fonts, which just adds more character to the page, I think. I also added like page numbers and small things that I didn't really do for the prelim task that I added in for this task. For my large image, I didn't really have to think about that for my prelim task because I didn't have another page to think about but the front cover. So I had to make this image differ from the front cover but still show that it's the same artist and that they're featured there. So I kept the costumes the same, but I just added graphics and also used mise-en-scène, the guitar and the headphones to tie in the whole music element of the magazine, but then also make sure that the readers knew that the magazine is going to be music based and it's not like pop or any other genre that is sort of gossip based.